Start the video. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems, and his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that she bore her child who might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God into his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. So when you read this, you can kind of get the gist of what's being said here. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that the woman is Israel, the child is Jesus, the dragon is Satan. So those things, the stars swept down, the bad angels, I think we can all have a pretty good idea of what the general gist of it is. But how would a first century Jew see this? Because as we've been studying, most of this comes right out of the Old Testament understanding of Jewishness. Anybody want to comment?
No way on the sideways.
They have a veil.
They have a veil, that's true. Okay, so we're going to look at a quick little video. If I can get it. So this is going to be about 10 minutes long. This is Dr. Michael Heiser. He's an Old Testament scholar, and he's going to give us his understanding of how they may have understood these verses from a first century perspective, and then we're going to go through and just discuss it ourselves a little bit.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar that the Qumran people use is the only calendar in the ancient world that creates a time window for the Messiah's arrival that matches Jesus. I don't think that's a coincidence. This is a zodiac mosaic in a Jewish synagogue. There are a lot of these, a couple dozen of them that archaeologists have found. And you would look at this and say, well, these Jews must have been pagans then. No, they had a different perception of what was going on in the sky and who's in charge and what it means, as opposed to pagans. Pagan astrology, astronomy, there really wasn't much of a difference in the ancient world. Is more like what we think of today with horoscopes, the individual birth signs, when I was born, what day, what's going on, that determines my fate, it determines my personality, it determines the outcomes. Well, no, it doesn't do any of those things. The Jew would say that's heresy. Only God is sovereign. What you can tell is that God is working a plan. Because God's plans are linked to time. So we need to be paying attention to what the skies are doing, because they might tell us something about what God is about to do. Now, the people who are really into this would be the people at Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. They have a number of astronomical there. They track this like. Let's put it this way. They separated from the Pharisees. They thought the Pharisees were liberals. Because the Pharisees used a calendar they didn't like. So, we hear that and we think it's crazy. They were that serious about it. But I want to move from this idea that there was a Jewish conception of the skies were important, what's going on here, because they telegraph certain things. To Revelation 12. I can't prove this, but I suspect that what Paul was thinking we actually have recorded in Revelation 12. But John in Revelation says this. Several times he says, I looked up to the sky and saw. What if John actually meant what he said? What if he's keying parts of Revelation to astronomical signage?
What if he's doing
What if he's doing that?
A great
A great sign appeared in heaven.
A woman
Clothed with the sun,
with the moon
under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars.
She was
She was pregnant
and was
and
crying
was
out
crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth.
And another
And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon,
with seven
with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems.
His tail
swept down a third of the stars of heaven
and cast
and cast them to earth.
And the
And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth,
so that when
she bore her child, he might devour it.
she gave birth
to a male child,
one who is
to rule all the nations
with a rod
of iron.
But her child
was caught up to God
and to his
and to his throne.
Okay, verse 5
is crystal clear.
It's quoting
a messianic psalm.
Okay, it's
quoted elsewhere about Jesus.
This is a
reference to the birth of the Messiah.
The notion of
being caught up to God in his throne is a notion of the resurrection and ascension.
But before that, you get all this
astronomical imagery.
Now, I'm not the
first one to suggest this,
but I suspect
very strong
that this is what
Paul was thinking about
when he said,
hey, have people heard about,
the Savior,
the Savior, heard
what's going
on here?
And
you expect him to say no. He says, well,
they
actually have.
And then he quotes
Psalm 19.
See,
Revelation 12 doesn't exist yet.
Okay, Revelation
is the last book of the New Testament, but he quotes Psalm 19.
It says,
they've heard.
The heavens
declare the glory of God, so on and so forth. All these verbs of communication.
Paul is associating
the knowledge
of the Messiah,
King, his arrival,
with something
going on in the skies.
That much
we can say.
And Revelation
12 gives us a pretty easy thing to track
in an astronomy
program.
Now, I'm
going to go through some of this.
But before I
do it, let me say what I'm not saying. There are those in evangelical circles, their belief was that
you could look at
the constellations of the skies and they told you the entire plan of salvation. Like they went through the Romans road to heaven. I don't believe that.
Okay, that
overclaims the data.
What I do believe
is that
like the
Magi,
there's something
going on
at a
certain time in history
that told
them
there's going to be
a divine king born in Bethlehem. Saddle up the camels. We have to go see.
Jews would have
noticed it.
Gentiles,
the Magi would have noticed it
because they were
watching.
And they believed
that the Creator God, the God of Israel,
was capable
of telegraphing stuff like this.
I don't think it's
a coincidence that the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar the Qumran people use is the only calendar in the ancient world that creates a time window for the Messiah's arrival that matches Jesus.
Okay, I don't
think that's a coincidence.
So,
having said that, let's get into what I think we can claim.
On your screen,
you see a few things. There's the sun and the moon, and then there's a line. The line is called the ecliptic. This is a line that astronomers would draw to track the movement of the constellations.
You notice the
sun and the moon. The sun is in the midst of the woman,
the Virgin,
Virgo.
Okay, and
Virgo, again, there's different ways to understand the 12 stars around her head, depending on which astronomer you would be. That you can get 12 stars in this or that method. Again, she's the woman with the 12 stars, the virgin who is about to give birth. The sun is in her midst.
It's Revelation
12.
And
the moon is at her feet.
You'll notice
above her head, I've let my astronomy program show Regulus and Jupiter.
They are not
mentioned in Revelation 12, but if you put the information in Revelation 12 into an astronomy program, this is produced.
What's the big deal
about Regulus and Jupiter?
Jupiter
was the king planet because it's the biggest one.
Regulus
was viewed as the king star because of its brightness.
Okay,
Okay,
here
they are
overlapped.
overlapped.
They are
They are superimposed on each other.
If you are
If you are one of these old ancient astronomy guys,
that's going
to draw your attention
because both
are associated with
kingship.
kingship.
Constellation
Virgo is the only constellation that represents a woman.
For 20
For 20 days,
Virgo
was clothed with the sun.
But the
exact day when the moon was under her feet,
at the same
time, and by the way, when Regulus and Jupiter intersect.
And this is
the view over Jerusalem, by the way.
That could only
occur during an 80-minute period within those 20 days.
Okay,
astronomy is linked to time,
so we can
calculate.
You'll notice I've put the stick figures in now for the constellation, so you can see this a little better. We've got in the center there, that's Virgo.
The center there, that's Virgo.
Sun, moon at her
feet.
feet. Jupiter and
Regulus co-joined. And what is the constellation above
Virgo?
It's
the lion. It's Leo. What does that mean?
What does that mean to a Jew?
The lion is
the sign of what?
The tribe
of Judah. Okay.
Judah. Regulus
and
Jupiter are
intersecting in Leo.
What was that king?
What tribe is he supposed to be from?
Oh yeah.
Judah.
And you notice
below her feet,
in modern
astronomy programs, we have two constellations. One is Libra,
the other is
Scorpio.
In the ancient
world, they were one constellation, and it was like a scorpion with pincers.
And scorpions
were at times referred to as a dragon.
But you have another
option for the dragon.
That is Hydra.
Also located below Virgo, but off the ecliptic.
Doesn't really matter.
You got two choices.
Okay, he's
ready to devour the child when the child is born.
There's a small
window of time when all of these things
are present.
September 11th, 3 BC date also corresponded. What a coincidence.
To Rosh
Hashanah, Tishri 1.
New Year's
Day for Jews.
And the Day of
Trumpets.
Tishri
1 was also the New Year's Day of the civil calendar, according to the calendar accepted in Judah during the divided monarchy.
In other words,
it marked the first day
of the reign
of every new Davidic king.
What a coincidence.
All right. Any comments about it? I mean, I just think it's interesting. It doesn't mean that, we have to accept the idea. We're trying to understand how a first century Jew might view these things. And we have scholars that do work on this and understand how, what it looks like back then and stuff, and evidence that they have found, with the mosaics on their Jewish synagogue floors. That you showed there at the very beginning. Anybody want to comment or anything? Clark, you look like you want to say something. Seriously?
Oh, so that'd have to be taught though, right? So.
What?
That'd have to be taught.
What happened?
When you're growing up, the astronomy, that's for the Jews, they'd have to be learning that while they were growing up.
Well, if it's on their floor in their synagogues, you would think there's some sort of, but we have to disconnect our thinking, our understanding of horoscopes and all that from the way Jews would. Okay, you can't commingle it.
No, I understand.
Okay.
I was just saying, it'd be interesting to just go outside and look at the stars.
Yeah.
And watch them and say, oh, this is what's gonna happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there are lots of books on this kind of stuff. I've got one here. That's the Star of Bethlehem and the Babylonian astrology. I don't know why it's doing that.
It's probably trying to update or something.
Trying to be nuts. It was fine a while ago. But Babylonian astrology, talking about the Magi, and this is from a scholar who dug into this, lots of references and stuff. So if you think about them coming from the east, and And maybe during Christmas time next year, we'll do a class on it and stuff in more
Are you
detail.
talking about the three wise men or?
Yeah.
It doesn't say three, but yeah.
Yeah.
In response to Clark,
Well, it was three gifts, right? So.
yeah, you're saying they studied it, and we're trying to get in the minds of a first century Jew.
Right.
They didn't have all the thing, you didn't, when the lights went out, the lights went out.
Yeah,
And so they didn't
they watch TV.
watch TV or get on the internet or any of that stuff.
That's a good point.
So maybe you think, what do? Maybe you go
Well,
outside
it's saying
and
they all
talk
did.
about the stars,
Yeah.
and so that's their study of the stars where we're not in tune. I mean, I don't do that.
Yeah, I get
You
what
guys
you're
do that at
Something
least
like
regularly.
that.
Unless you're in this shaman.
Yeah.
But
I'd have to
it's
look
no
at
comment for
it.
them because what else can you do?
Yeah, I agree. I'd have to look at what's.
I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. I'm just
That makes
trying to
sense.
get
They
in
use
that
the stars
mindset.
as a guidance, a map for direction, everything. In
Oh, yeah.
fact, our astronauts and also our Navy, they use that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's still done today,
Even
for
That's
navigation.
done by that. That's their. instead
We-
of just
But for the
radar.
common Jew that's probably never leaves the 10 square mile area, that there was probably an aspect of entertainment or something else to it that's what they did.
Well, the seasons. would
Yeah,
tell
it's
them.
the seasons, hey.
Well, we're gonna talk a little.
It's about time for
That-
plant corn.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about this.
Farmers almanac type stuff.
So as we go through these slides, I just want us to be cautiously approaching these verses. And while this section can be complex, we need to keep an open mind as we try and understand first century Christian Jews. When studying the people and the phenomena we are studying, we naturally think about ourselves in it. When we ourselves study a subject, we tend to do so from our point of view and our own experiences. We take what we already know and believe is correct. So we then cautiously approach new information with great skepticism, especially if it seems to contradict what we already know. And this is especially true when the information concerns our own beliefs. So here's this is basically what he was doing, a little higher up. I'm not gonna go through all this, just wanted you to see a little higher level of, because I know that screen was kind of small to see on the TV. So you get the idea,
Oh.
the moon
I
down there.
picture it as the Jewish GPS. with
There you
stars
go.
and stuff,
Yeah.
There you go.
You know?
That's good. Jewish GPS. I like
One of the things here I want to point out that we're not going to get into today, and we'll get into it when we get into chapter 17, 18, but notice the, where is it, verse 3, is it? Yeah, verse 3, see it says, "And another sign appeared in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and the 7 diadems." In chapter 17, and this was in your text that I sent out, if you read through there, that John tells you basically what these 7 heads are. And if you remember, it's there's also a reference back to Daniel 7 and 8 about the 4 beasts, which is part of this 7. And the angel there also tells you exactly who they are. Now, John doesn't actually name them, but we'll get into it, but basically right here you get an idea, and we'll go into this greater detail when we get to chapter 17. But the first beast would have been Egypt that tried to assimilate Israel. The second one is Assyria, who exiled the 10 tribes of Israel. Babylon, which is what Daniel saw. So for Daniel, that's the first beast. And then Persia would be the second for Daniel. Greece would be the third. And John, when we get to chapter 17, John will say, one is now. And that'll be Rome, because that's the current one. And then my belief and many other beliefs is that Islam is the 7th one. And out of the 10 horns, another one will rise, and it'll be a 8th revived empire. You'll hear people talk about, of course, in most Baptist churches and evangelicals talk about a revived Roman Empire. I think it's a revived Islam empire. But we'll get to that in greater detail. I'll show you all the proof text, so to speak, when we get to chapter 17. So in Genesis 1, if you guys recall, tells us about God puts the lights in the heavens to declare himself in his appointed times. Those appointed times are what is called a Moedim. So he said in verse 14 there in Genesis 1, and God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And so those were put up there for a reason, and most scholars will tell you that we don't really teach this kind of stuff because we're not Jewish. So in most evangelicals, it's taught like seasons, like 4 seasons, and that's about it. But for Jewish, it's all about the appointed festivals during the year. And those signs, because they didn't have a calendar like we do, a clock. And so they were always looking towards the heavens to say, hey, when's that next appointed festival coming up? Did you have a question, Darren? So, as Heiser mentioned in the video that Paul quotes in Romans 1, let's look at Psalm 19 here. And feel free to interrupt if you have a question or something as we go forward. The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and the expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge, or if that's a star. There is no speech, nor are there words, the voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, okay? That line is that ecliptic. That's what that is. Their line has gone out through all the earth. Paul quotes this in Romans 10, so he restates Psalm 19 in quotes a different part of it. And their utterances to the end of the world. In them, he has placed a tent for the sun, which is a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens and its circuit to the other end of them. And there is nothing hidden from its heat. You guys, I'm sure you've heard this. This is Ecclesiastes 3, verse 11. He has put eternity in our hearts. The full verse is, he has made everything beautiful in its time. And also he has put eternity into man's heart. Yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Such a quiet group today. So the reason I put this up here, I just want you to see this is more of an eclectic, but ecliptic line, and kind of going back to what Paul said here in Romans 10. So faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. But I say, have they never heard? On the contrary, they have. Their voice has gone out into all the earth. Whose voice? He's talking about the heaven. And their voice to the words of the ends of the world. He's quoting here from Psalm 19, verse 4. And you can see this in your own footnotes in your Bibles. So as we've said here, a great sign appeared in heaven. God established in the heavens as a sign. The ancient Near East people studied the heavens and stars. Babylon, you call them Chaldeans, were no exception. When the Jews were exiled there, Daniel and his friends became chief rulers over everything. Look at that in Daniel 1. Second only to the king. It is safe to assume that Daniel learned the science from them, but God granted him and his friends supernatural wisdom and knowledge. And could it be that Daniel's prophecy in chapter 9 about the 70 weeks, that the Magi knew what to look for in the heavens about a new king who would rule the earth? It would be fair to say that Daniel learned and taught everything in their culture. And then I think we can get some infer there in Daniel 1, Daniel 2, if we go back and look at that. Everybody following so far?
It's interesting though.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The Bible, that's the beautiful thing about this. It's just, it's so deep.
Yeah, it is. You're
Because now you're
processing all this.
making me question everything I read. Is there something else behind it?
Well,
You know,
there's
it's
different,
good way.
there's different
Yeah, yeah.
levels of God's, it's a well, it's infinite. And even when we have our new bodies and we're with God, He's still gonna keep revealing this stuff. It's infinite. And He gives us, but His Word is just so full of stuff. There's this level and this level, and you go deeper and you learn more stuff. You're like, I see, as long as you can,
I'll share something with you fast. I was reading Psalm 2 the other day. I think I told Eric too, and I was like, normally I read it, I just read it, but now when I read it, I remember from last week he talked about in Revelation.
Yeah.
And Psalm 19 was one of my favorite Psalms, so I know it for word. So reading it now is going to be different, is what I'm saying.
All right, that's fantastic.
It's
Gotta
got
look at it. Look at it like a little different with Paul and his quoting from it and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what God wants you to do is connect the puzzle. Put the puzzle pieces together.
It's a lot though. I mean,
Yeah, it is.
it's a lot.
Yeah. But only those who God reveals it to those who are Bereans who want to
Well, that's
know
true. Yeah.
and study it for themselves and figure it out. I know there's a puzzle piece like we've talked about in this class, like what are all the numbers about? 40, 3, 7, 10, 1,000. They're all there for a reason. They're all in different places.
6.
They're there for a reason.
Well,
They're not just arbitrary.
Yeah.
So explain to me what a Berean is.
Acts 17, where Paul's goes to this part in Mesopotamia, where there's a group. I forget the name, but the Bereans, that's the name of that area. And so Paul's talking to them, and so it says they go and study the scriptures for themselves to see if what Paul says is correct.
They don't just take Paul's
They don't
word
just take
for it.
Paul's word for
They
it.
go
And that's why we call it, that's why we call them
Being a
Bereans,
Berean.
because they don't just take someone's word for it, they go search it out for
Right.
themselves. And that's what we should be doing as well.
I've heard y'all say that.
Yeah. No, it's a good question, and I apologize, because I assume so many people know so much, but then there's people that may not, like yourself, and that's perfectly fine to ask.
I asked the same question when I joined this group.
Berea was up in that area. It's kind of like Corinth and Galatia and
Right.
kind of that Turkish area, the near east.
It's kind of cool to look at it, and he was writing Galatians, and Revelations wasn't even written yet, but you can connect it, you know what I mean? So cool.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah. All right. So, for the majority of history, these things were studied. Because we're modern, we don't really think about it, care about it. We can't even see it now because of all the light pollution. But I think Daniel became really adept in it, learning all the Babylonian ways. The Magi, which I believe came from Babylonia, and so does this guy in this book. And he's got a fascinating website too, where you can get some general gist of things, but really detailed and well documented as well, I might say.
Say the zodiac sign was created by Babylon.
Yeah, and he does talk about that in here as well. That's good.
Yes, sir. Zodiac sign was what?
Put by the Babylon.
Created by Babylonians?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
just a little before 500 BC.
Oh, yeah, you just said that with Daniel. That's where he probably learned it from. Okay.
Yeah, but I think what Clarence is saying is that most people don't realize that Babylonians it was there before, but they kind of perfected it, if you will, and organized it in a way where a lot of culture started kind of using it. Because when they conquer, they spread their knowledge and stuff, just like the Greeks did and the Romans did. if you look at this video, go back and look at the video on YouTube, you'll see that there's a link there if you want to look at, that, where it says good short article on all this, pretty interesting. But then I want to talk about remember how the Bible talks about birth pains and labor. Astronomical symbols in the sky show that the ancients looking at these constellations, as Heiser said, seeing kings being born and kingdoms falling. So that's what we were looking at, is that video. And and right here is the video, we're not going to play it, but I put it at the front because I kept just debating, like, well, do I wait? Do I put it at the front? Do I, do it right here? So I think doing it at the front, I think it worked out better that way. So now here's another interpretation of Revelation 12. Most commentaries will give you this interpretive perspective, and so I wanted to make sure I gave it to you. You could reference back to Genesis 37 and 9. Remember Joseph and his brothers there in Egypt when they were looking for food? And then Joseph, dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowed down to me." It's not quite exactly the same as what we see in Revelation 12. That's what you'll see a lot of references to. Again, you have to make up your own mind what all these things are kind of saying. But we do know that the woman is Israel. We know the dragon is Satan and the child is Christ, is Jesus. In Joseph's dream, Joseph represents Jesus. The sun and the moon are his parents in this interpretation, and the stars are the tribes of Israel. When I say the stars, 12 stars, even though Joseph is one, so there'd be 11 stars in his scenario. But Revelation says Israel's giving birth. So what you see here in Revelation 12, and it continues into chapter 13. This is a parentheses. We finished chapter 11 last week. And so you have this pause, and it's like John and Jesus are going back and saying, okay, let's pause here, give you some background information, kind of real fast history, so to speak. So Revelation says Israel's giving birth. Since we see a child, Christ is in the child, and the metaphor of birth is the final culmination of all prophecy regarding Christ coming to final set up his kingdom and destroy Satan's rule. So you can see the whole thing happening there in chapter 12, all the way through chapter 12. We'll get into it more as we talk about a third of the heaven and all that. The angels being swept down and Satan being thrown down to earth, because it all goes together, but it's just a real compressed time period. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Okay. So as we're going through Revelation, we're kind of in a parentheses. We're in a pause as we're looking at, something a little bit outside of everything else, but it all connects as they do here. So it's the very last paragraph there, but this doesn't happen all in a single moment, but I believe it's the latter part of the 7 years, the last 3.5 years, per the verse 12:6, 1260 days, which we saw in chapter 11 with the two witnesses. And then the woman flees into the wilderness for safety. This is something that Jesus does mention in Matthew 24. So now it's like 20 till. We can keep going, but unless you guys have any questions or comments about any of this, I know it's a lot thrown at you, but just
I'll comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Please do.
Say something, Brent. Be quiet.
Yeah, the Zodiac, all that stuff. I've always dismissed that as a bunch of.
Same here. Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting, and a lot of what Heiser said is a bridge too far for me yet. I mean, maybe if I look into this more.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's wrong. It's just.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced. But the fact that the zodiac calendar, or whatever you want to call that, graph, is found in Jewish temples, I think it was eye-opening to me.
Something.
Oh, okay, I don't know, yeah, have you never heard that before?
I never heard that.
Okay, yeah, a lot of,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's new to me.
Yeah.
Observation.
But there was a lot of things that should have been in the Jewish temple too that was brought in.
Well, that's right.
Ungodly.
Yeah, right.
That's true.
But I mean, that was just
Yeah, so you gotta go with that.
Well,
yeah,
we're
interesting
talking
that
about.
that would be found in a Jewish temple. That,
Yeah, so
those two
this-
things I would have never thought would have coincided.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard about it a few years back, you know, I'd never heard it either,
Yeah.
but that's what archaeologists discovered in these synagogues that they've dug up. You know, these floors have this mosaic in there, but they don't look at it like, you know, moderns look at it. Like
I mean, there's
Porto.
two different points of view on the
Right.
same thing.
Yeah,
Get that?
Yeah.
And the other thing that was really eye-opening, I've read it probably a dozen times, was Genesis 1:14 about, you know, I kind of think of the stars as just kind of random, but they weren't random. God put them there in a specific order that we could tell the times and the seasons and stuff. I mean, that tie from Genesis 1 to Revelation is pretty interesting.
I had an observation on that graph that Dr. Heiser put up with Jupiter
yeah,
above the woman,
yeah,
the dragon. Well, Jupiter was the god that Antiochus and all them was going to set up in the temple. Yeah.
right.
So it's like above, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Very
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what, you know, one of the things they're saying, like I said, maybe a bridge too far, all the zodiac stuff, but don't treat these ancient Jews and ancient civilizations like they're stupid.
That's right.
Right.
They could, you know, they had anything else to do at night, so like Glenn said, they went out and they paid attention, they saw the movement patterns of those stars and planets and all that stuff. And so clearly there was a repeating cycle they caught on to.
Right.
And then it was revealed through some of them what all that meant. And so that's what we're really talking about. It's what,
Yeah, and I don't know
what are
if
those
you tried-
patterns?
Jesus said it in his, he goes, you feel the summer breeze and you know the heat waves coming,
Yeah.
the northern wind and go,
Yeah.
but how can you not look at the sky or the stars and know what's going to happen? So he prophesies about that as well.
Maybe
Well,
we
we were
were taking astrology class, huh?
There you go.
Yeah, it's a tool that we don't use.
Yeah.
GPS, like you said, that was just GPS. I mean,
I look up, I don't know what I'm seeing.
no, I don't either. And honestly, you know, they say, okay,
I don't think that very that bright.
I mean, to me, that is imagination. I don't see anything there.
Give me another one yesterday.
Wow.
Came
You know
out.
what?
That one's
The,
moving on.
science-
Yeah, that one's.
And they say that there's
Yeah.
enough right now for all the people in the world. They can own up to 8,000 stars
What was
for each individual.
Oh, okay.
For each individual's they can claim up to 8,000 stars, and they think it could be triple that amount. There's so many stars that they can't
It's a
number.
lot of stars.
I
out
couldn't
there.
use more than 2,000 or 3,000.
Wow.
Yeah,
I think one of the reasons
That's
why,
you can't fathom that.
no,
and the universe is still growing.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why it's difficult sometimes to look at these subjects and accept it and talk about it in these contexts is because we look at it as modern people from the perspective of what it has become, Right. not from the perspective of how God created it to be. So whether it's the zodiacs or astronomical things or sex or whatever, I mean, those are two big topics we don't talk about in the church.
Yeah,
But God created both of them.
for a good purpose.
I mean, Michael just pointed out that verse in Genesis, I think it was, where God said, I created these things for signs, for me, in the very first book of the Bible. But what has astrology become? And that's how we look at it.
Sure.
What the devil has taken it and made it into.
Perverted it.
And I think in sex is the same way. I mean, there's sexual things all through the Bible.
Yeah.
But when we hear these things, we think about things on the internet that we've seen that we shouldn't have watched. So it makes us, it makes it so we can't talk about it in the way that God intended it, because it has become something else.
Yeah.
So we just let it go.
Yeah,
And when we just let it go, we miss this whole thing
it's like.
that God was trying to do.
That's true.
So
Right on target.
for me, instead of looking at these symbols in the Jewish temple and saying, oh, I don't know if
So
that,
this wasn't in the temple, this was in the synagogue.
In the synagogue.
Just to be clear.
Jewish buildings, you know, instead of looking at it and say, oh, I don't know about this, well, automatically there's a thing where I'm looking at it from a modern perspective,
Okay.
in my opinion.
We need to start looking through God's eyes, not ours.
Yeah.
We were raised
Because
in,
our faith should draw us from the world, to be separate from the world, but the world is separating faith from man.
it's
Very
very
opening
difficult.
discussion right there. I agree with a lot of
The
that.
church has taken a lot of supernatural out of the Bible.
See you, Clarence.
Exactly. We've grown up in evangelical circles. It's just, I was going to say that exact thing. Plus, the occultism conduct with so much of the church belief, understanding. I mean, most recently the rainbow. We don't want to touch
Yes.
it because I used to have these ski suspenders that were rainbow. This was back in the 80s,
Yeah.
70s.
Boy, going way back.
Well, suspenders, right? I remember that way because I never would. I couldn't see a time in the near future where I would put them on without identifying. So, and there's a
Project God stuff. Yeah.
well,
You get buzzed.
stars are the exact same thing because the evangelical churches, and I was raised to not even look at the zodiac thing because it's got a cult all over it.
Right.
But it would take some spine for the church to step up and say, this is ours.
Take it back.
Take it back.
And just saying.
We just,
It's okay,
That's good.
but that's what we're
That's
here
good.
for, is to just, look at an alternative way of what these scriptures are saying and looking at it through their eyes and not our modern eyes, and we just have to be open-minded to it. And I'm not saying, go out and get a telescope and start, looking for signs. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to. Like my wife, she's into looking at the stars, astronomy, and she loves that kind of stuff. And she has little apps and all that kind of stuff.
I think the beauty of it for me is the authenticity of it, like from the Jew perspective, because that's what God created it for, right? And everybody else came after. So I would like to see it from that perspective.
Yeah.
Before it got perverted, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, the Bible says that one of the reasons that man has no excuse not to believe in God is because creation itself screams.
That's
What does that mean? You just look at a tree and you see God?
You see
Well, partly, but it's also all this too.
Yeah.
I mean, you look up into space and see all these stars, and a lot of us just look at it and we're just like,
And we
yeah,
can't touch
it's
them.
beautiful.
It's
you
gotta
know?
be somebody greater.
Yeah.
Well, it's breathtaking if you don't see that, like you say, they grew up, that's all they knew. They didn't have outside of candlelight. And we go out to
That's
the
right.
nature and you see the stars with no city lights, it's breathtaking.
It is breathtaking.
And you
We also
can't-
don't know what we're looking at.
Right.
Well, no.
So if you're like me, you just gotta look at it and go, oh,
That's a pretty star.
Cool.
That's a
I'm out.
Well, it's romantic, but.
But it's just what you're used to. We don't do that now.
Right, we don't do that.
We simply don't know. You could go outside your lawn chair, turn all the lights out, and stare at the pretty lights, but you wouldn't, like Clark and I were saying, you would have to be very diligent to know, hey, that one's not in the same place it was yesterday or a
That's
week
why
ago.
these
or whatever.
apps, like my wife has,
Yeah.
iPad stuff, they're really helpful because you can turn off, like he was doing in the video, you can turn them on and off and see the creatures, whatever you want to call them, whatever.
I think we should all do
Big
stuff
Dipper
this week.
and stuff like that.
Things like that. So, there are apps out there to deal with it.
What's the app?
I think it would be
I learned in Boy Scouts
instructive for
for
us
navigation
to
purposes.
Go out and look at the
I love
stars
that.
with a different point of view.
I think you're right.
And forget about all the zodiac crap,
Michael,
the earthly stuff.
Michael,
You try to think about it
can you
more
put
as.
it in the group?
Next
I'm
Sunday
in.
school party at Darren's,
I'm
we'll be in
in.
the middle of the night.
I think,
Can you put the app in
Yeah.
the group, the name of the
Send me the
app?
blog post, we should.
They
do
want
that.
music.
build it. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Thing?
I don't know what it is. So next week, we're gonna start verse 7, the rest of the chapter, in chapter 12. I put in red there, I want you to notice for yourself that there's 5 times that, which is, I think is something to be looking out for, that it says Satan is thrown down to earth 5 times. One of them is actually with the angels, but still 5 times. So we're out of time, but before we leave, I just want to say we have a new guest. What was your name?
Yeah,
Doug Beal,
Doug. Doug is a new guest here, so make sure you say hi to Doug.
welcome Doug. Yes, I'd like to join you guys each week.
Yeah,
Come on.
We appreciate it. We're sorry it's
We're gonna
so.
find a bigger room.
It's not the typical Sunday school class you're.
Oh, I like this.
Okay, good. Well, good.
Good.
There you go. All
this
right.
back and forth that we do is a trademark of ours. I mean, we're not just here for you to hear what I think about the Bible.
Iron sharpens
We
iron.
say something, what do you think?
It just gets everybody thinking.
Yeah.
So
Come on back, see us.
I think with that, I will close us in prayer and we'll be dismissed.